Okay, so before I get everything started, I guess, hello, everybody. A little while back, Damian in the Fantasy Strike Discord community ran a tournament, a 1 versus 1 tournament. Is a pretty neat deal. It was region restricted to the sort of North America sort of region. There's some extension beyond that a little bit, but the idea is to sort of prioritize having good ping, good connection, and as smooth as an experience as possible for people looking to play 1v1. Other tournaments are open globally, which is good, but like I guess as an organizer, they're looking for something else to their different sort of structure, I guess, or style. So I guess I'm starting by introducing the tournament so we know the context for this replay review, which is going to be the Rook Mirror is the first game I played in the tournament. On the whole, I think the quality of matches from the tournament were pretty okay. Certainly going to be good stuff to go over, so I thought for fun and maybe for the enjoyment of other folks wanting to look over stuff later, could do some replay analysis of the different matchups that came up over the course of everything. So for today, we're just going to talk about the Rook Mirror. We have 3 games between me, DrZeus, and Organous. I don't think there's a ton more to say about the background of everything. Fun tournament, good stuff, good play. I think the whole video, the whole recordings are going to be posted, or they're already posted on wherever Damian keeps track of this stuff. So I'll try and make sure that whatever description spots have links to it for anybody who wants to watch the whole tournament viewing sort of experience. So I guess maybe an important question to answer about replay review before we go any further is what's the upside of this? I've done some review already with C. Chavez on, what was it, Rook and DeGray. And I did some replay review with Janet for Rook and Lum. It was fun. But I never really touched on this, so I think now's a good time to bring up that no single game is going to be a perfect example of how a matchup plays out. We're all kind of familiar with that idea, right? But there's value in replay review, I think, because going over a specific match gives us a chance to expose the lines of thinking and gameplay evaluations that made the game turn out the way it did. So by looking over this stuff, it's not like we're going to say, oh, here's exactly how this goes every time. But when we play in the future, we can remember the way these games went, the kind of decisions that were involved, and use it as a sort of template's not quite the right word, but use the examples here as a sort of foundation for our understanding of how stuff might play out. So as we go, I prepared notes and everything, so hopefully it'll be pretty smooth. But if you want to ask any questions or bring anything up, please definitely feel free. I'll keep an eye around, and we'll work through it all together. So the other thing that I think would be good to know before we get started is that I'm going to talk a lot of details of interactions and mix-ups and things maybe as we're going over these replay reviews. And when I play, I know I'm a really analytical I have an analytical approach, so I think about a lot of the stuff inside a match. But nobody has to think about all this stuff while playing the game, right? Some people want to think everything through as it's happening very deliberately. Some people play by instinct and feel. Most people are somewhere in between. So I think it's worth mentioning that you don't have to approach learning in the way that I do or whatever. I'm not trying to say it's a certain style is going to be best. Just want to mention that I don't want anybody to feel like excluded or like we talk through stuff and you get the sense that maybe this stuff isn't for me. My hope is it's useful to you. So please take away whatever you can get out of it that's handy for you. Okay. So all that out of the way. We're ready to get started. So this was a best of 3 match standard Fantasy Strike 1v1 stuff, so it's 4 rounds. And as we go through the whole recording, I'm going to be pausing really frequently to talk about specific bits and pieces as they come up. So it won't be very uninterrupted. I recommend going check out the full like tournament recording for that kind of normal viewing experience. Before round 1 begins, I'm going to mention a few major features of the matchup for anybody unfamiliar with Rook mirrors. It's a weird one. Like most mirror matches, you get very specific sorts of interactions that don't come up in others, but I think the Rook mirror sort of shines where a lot of mirrors suffer, which is there's a couple important ways that moves work that make the matchup really interesting to play. First of these is that Vine's Rook's jumping B move breaks armor, and it's safe, or it can be safe, if it's done low and close to the a grounded opponent. In other situations, it's extremely punishable. But this lets a Rook who's on the aggressive side of things have a way to end their pressure safely. If you manage to jump at your opponent, they don't respond, you get close to them, you can use the vines to end your pressure, and because it breaks armor, it's safe against all of Rook's conventional anti-air tools. Second thing is that meter is extremely important. So we'll see this across the set, but Ground Super sort of intuitively is a handy defensive tool, but Jump Super is the real business. Honestly, if one Rook has meter and the other doesn't, Jump Super allows really degenerate looping, jumping stuff inside mix-up situations, and it's very difficult for the opponent to escape safely. They're going to have to guess right in like a very critical moment. So if both players have meter, then the situation changes again. Let's say one Rook has meter, they control the air. If both Rooks have meter, then anytime they both end up in the air, you end up in this weird game of chicken where you are always, whoever goes second wins the head crush battle. So it's sort of this game of chicken. If one person presses an air normal, then they can bop the other person out of the air before they can react. If they both jump and do nothing, then whoever breaks and presses Jump Super first is the one that's going to lose. Very, very tricky. So, as long as you have meter, you get to play that game. If you don't have meter, you just lose when you're in the air. And the last thing is that all of Rook's mix-ups on the ground, normally one of his very strong suits, are weakened because Rook's ground C, the grounded armor grab, it beats frame traps and grabs and the other player's ground C too. Whoever goes second wins that exchange too, because the whole move has throw invulnerability. So when you're on defense and the opponent's on the ground, GC is very strong. But yeah, it's always weak to the air. So unlike Rook's normal like three-way mix-up he's threatening, against another Rook it's mostly like a 50-50 between doing something on the ground and jumping to punish the ground C. So despite mix-ups on the ground being weaker, it is worth noting that winning them is really good, because meter is so important. Getting a throw to deny the opponent meter gain can really swing the matchup in your favor. Okay, so I guess we've probably stared at the static screen long enough. We'll go ahead and fire it up, starting with Game 1, Round 1. So,
Round 1.
The way this round starts is with an immediate forward jump A from Organous. And see it here, that's the normal sort of look. Whenever you press splash as early as possible, Rook enters it around here and he'll do it all the way down to the ground. I think a thing about this move, and the way you can think about it in general in the matchup, is that it'll win air to air if the other person decided to jump without the big heavy risk of doing like an early air vines. Doing vines early in the air wins air to air too, but it's very unsafe on the ground. So jump forward A is good on block. It's good air to air. The one big weakness is that when you do it this early, it's reactable with ground C or Rook's armored command grabs. This case I block it. Second time I see it coming, can get the throw here. So the post ground C Oki is pretty weird. Rook, in a lot of, like against a lot of characters, Rook doesn't have this option, but in the mirror, Rook can do a tiny walk forward and do neutral A, which can hit meaty, beating things like ground C. Can also do a normal throw or jump. So neutral A and jump are both pretty safe. Throw loses badly to ground C or Yomi, of course. But the big upside of throw is great because you're, again, denying them meter. Less chances for them to hold jump super over your head. So in this situation, I do the short walk forward and jump, which is mostly, I think, just incorrect. This could bait out like a ground C, but if it's 14 frames, it's not necessarily very reactable, right? So if they're wanting to beat a throw, they have to reversal ground C anyway. It's not like a high value thing. And if they think I'm going to stay grounded and do a strike mix-up, I'm going to beat GC with normal, like, neutral A anyway. So the whole upside of the situation, I guess, is that the walk forward here wasn't particularly useful, and it meant that I ended up in the air at about the same height as the defending player. And then when both players are in the air like that, it is sort of a guessing game who wants to commit to something in the air first. As the offensive player, I can start forward jump A earlier if I want to, but doing it first thing in the air does expose me to danger if the opponent stayed on the ground. So the absolute safest thing for a aggressive player to do here, if you jump early, you just sort up a grounded, or sorry, a low vines to break the opponent's armor, be safe on block, but it's always soft to this sort of jump early idea. Jump early forward. Okay. We'll see another example later. This walk forward can have more upside if the opponent has ground super, but in this situation it's just sort of worse than jumping right away. So I'm gonna keep going for a bit. We're poking at each other. We'll see a lot of weird decisions about using back A thunderclap as a sort of anti-air, so we'll cover it when it comes up, but it's a questionable decision in a lot of cases. So at 48 here, what we're coming up to is that Org gets a meaty back A, and being on offense, they decide to use landslide to catch jumps. Critically, though, in this situation, they get the thunderclap and they don't cancel right away. They give it a couple frames post hit to do the ground beat, and as a result, I don't believe this is a special corner interaction. This is just the delay giving the defending Rook enough time to jump out of it. So it's always good to know if you're fighting an opponent who gets out of the landslide cancel every time. Lum always gets out. It's quite distressing. But in general, I don't know. Landslide's strong in the corner. If you catch them jumping, you get 3 damage and another like strong knockdown to continue pressure. But I think landslide tends to be a little risky in different ways. So in this very, very specific situation, jump worked out okay. It's often something Rook wants to do after blocking clap. If you have meter, it lets you sort of fight air to air, and you're only -1 compared to your opponent. So it's easy to stop whatever your opponent's trying to do by trading in a little meter. So I guess what all this is trying to say is that I think in a lot of situations, the mix-up after a blocked back A is between the attacker choosing throw or jumping to fight in the air. Landslide's pretty good if you read the throw, especially in the corner. You just have to, I guess, be wary of this kind of extra downside. With its long startup, there's always risk that the opponent sees and reacts to it before the block stun from back A ends, and then they can just stand on the ground and block and get a throw punish. So, anyway. Gets out of this one. Punish here is okay. Earthquake gets a knockdown. And a couple jumps late forward jump A. So, I think it's interesting to kind of contrast. If you jump at the opponent and you choose to do the forward jump A late, like here, Rook's feet are down at like chest height by the time he does it. It looks sketchy because maybe it's going to be an empty jump throw or an empty jump to bait a command grab or something like that. And I guess maybe most importantly is it's not reactable in the same way that the early one is with something like the armored command grab stuff. So up until the end, the opponent has to guess if they want to commit to trying to catch it. So yeah, again, the evaluation here is that a late forward jump A doesn't do super well if the opponent jumped at the same time. If they stay grounded, it loses to a predictive command grab, but it does punish passive blocking, which is the good thing Rook wants to do against Vine. So if you're on the ground and you think the opponent's being safe with things like Vines, then you probably want to just sort of wait it out, let them end their pressure, reset to neutral. If the opponent is looking to loop their pressure or force you into guessing games, then they might be going for these late forward jump A's, in which case you want to use your command grabs to scoop them out of the air and get the good damage. So here we get the knockdown with neutral A, and this is an interesting situation with 3 HP Rook, or this applies to any character, I guess, is that Rook's... Oh, sorry. My mistake. Is that Rook's Thunderclap applies 1 chip, so if the mix-up ends with Rook doing some kind of throw option, then chip will be preserved, they'll lose 1 or 2 life, and Rook does have chip setups that deal with the opponent, can get them the rest of the way with the 2 chip. So, in this situation, I mentioned, I think before, that Rook's mainline options in this kind of spot are to either jump to threaten the opponent with like another mix-up, jump in on them again, empty jump throw, something like that, or stay grounded and do a normal throw, beat the opponent trying to jump out and contest or something like that. So, in this situation, get a normal throw after Thunderclap, brings the opponent down to 1 HP with chip flashing, so the attacker gets to get the chip kill with neutral A, forward A. And if the neutral A is appropriately meaty, then you get a guaranteed block string to forward A, which is handy against anybody that has a true proper reversal. The defending Rook almost had it with meter coming up in just another probably couple of frames. But against characters that don't have reversals, or, I mean, if somebody has a reversal but they're maybe hesitant to use it, if you get an appropriately meaty neutral A, then they lose their opportunity. You just block string to forward A and they never get a chance to break out. So against a character without a real reversal, it doesn't need to be a perfectly true block string. Just having it be close enough to counter hit a throw is good. Okay. Round 2. So this one starts with vines air to air at the beginning. So when both players have meter, it's worth noting that jumping's pretty dangerous. If one player gets a chance to see the other, they can always commit to super to beat the opponent's air action. But if you do it early, the other person still has super, then they can retaliate in kind, right? So very scary for both players to be in the air. In some ways, it's safer to be the one on the ground, has ground super to work with, or something to sort of keep the opponent off you. Here at 56 or so, we get to see Rook's forward A. It doesn't have a lot of uses in a lot of matchups, to be honest. can think of it as a sort of poke in some cases, something to keep the opponent at bay and neutral, something to get a little chip to try and finish them off in a desperate situation. But it's sketchy for a few different reasons. The second hit can be reacted to. There's a pretty long time before it becomes active. And it's not like a totally free thing, and the connection you've got with your opponent can play into it as well. But it's not something that's really safe to commit to against anybody who's got a good reactive answer. Rook's ground C and ground super, both good examples of that. And the other thing is that while it can catch the opponent in the early part of a jump, it, in a lot, like if both players predicted about the same time, in this case, the attacking player, I guess, jumps up, the forward A starts just a few frames later, Rook gets completely over it and gets to punish with forward A, in this case, combo to neutral A to start some Oki pressure. So forward A in that way is a little bit like a fireball. If the other player predicts the forward A is coming, they can get a good jump and punish combo for 2 or 3, depending on what the opponent's looking to get. So after this, it's normal sort of Oki stuff mix-up is going on. Something always good to keep in mind is that Rook's counter hit here does allow a combo to back A and then GC for a total of 3 and still getting the good Oki knockdown. It takes some focus and concentration to be able to confirm it. And I think we'll see again here. I was thinking about it, but a miss it in the second attempt. So the window isn't terrible. You have a lot of hit stop frames to confirm it. In this case, it was, I think, literally a frame off or 2. There's 3 frames before it started. And yeah, the frame it hits is the frame that blocking starts. So the best part to really think about, though, is that it wasn't necessary. When the opponent's on 2 life, neutral A is fine. Forward A is even better. So it really was just sort of an unnecessary difficulty to put on yourself as Rook. Confirming into the ideal thing is nice, but when the opponent's at low health, when they're 3 or less, just focus on getting forward A. It's always the thing to look out for. I have to tell myself that lots of times. Not keeping focus on the context of your hit is definitely a mistake. So, and after this blocked back A, there's a couple other mistakes too. So a defending player decides to use ground super here, which I think is fine. It punishes any sort of grounded idea, normal throw, ground C. It might not be the absolute strongest spot to use meter compared to other stuff. I guess the big upside here is that because the defending player only has 1 HP, they can't afford to trade if the attacker goes for a weak frame trap or something. They can't just GC and trade 1 life for the knockdown. So defender uses super here reasonably, looking to turn around the round. As an attacker, if I'm going to jump after the back A, the direction to jump is definitely forward, right? If they do a command grab, it lets a punish happen. And then if you do jump backward, make some kind of mistake like this, and you saw that there was a command grab, the next best thing that could happen is an earthquake to punish the recovery and get the knockdown. With earthquake around, getting that knockdown will be a guaranteed chip out. With the defending player at 1 chip already, you get a back A to landslide whenever they wake up, finish them off. So a couple different mistakes there. And it's not that, I guess, it's good to always strive to not make mistakes and everything, right? But I think the important thing is the different layers of mistakes here, not confirming into the straightforward forward A combo to get the KO and jumping in the wrong direction, not getting this punish. It's important to not let mistakes kind of snowball into each other, and when a mistake does happen, keeping your mental focus intact to let that end there. Don't let one mistake carry over and influence you in other ways. Don't miss a counter hit confirm if we want to jump back 10 seconds or so. Yeah, it's like right off of here. When you miss a counter hit confirm, don't let that affect the next one that you're trying to do. Yeah, it's all a mistake. But anyway. So it just so happens that the forward A ends up working out here. There's not much for the other, like the defending player, to do but block. But it's like an uncomfortable situation. It's safer, definitely safer feeling to get out of the way. And if the opponent can't recover fast enough, then it genuinely is safe. Just sort of in that scrambly situation the forward A worked out. Okay, round 3. So here we have a fun little interaction with jump in head crush to beat the back A. So I think it's not always the case, but when one rook has meter and the other doesn't, I think the metered rook wants to exploit that advantage in any way that reasonably presents itself. So having meter for like an Oki mix after you knock them down lets you do powerful like looping jump stuff really, really safely. It's very hard for the opponent to contest it. But just using super during neutral or during the approach that lets you get in is also good, because the super knockdown itself locks down the opponent's meter gain. And as long as you can keep the mix-up going, you can keep building meter again while they don't get it. So as long as you're sitting on full meter, there's no... You're negative in the exchange, right? The opponent's always getting meter and you're not. So whatever you get to do to spend is in its own way sort of getting value. Similar idea with maybe, like, I don't know, in a Gray versus Rook matchup, being able to dump your super to get 1 damage when they jump in is pretty valuable, because you get to start building more meter again right away. So at this point, we see a pretty questionable ground C decision in Oki. So getting a throw knockdown is good. We want to keep the defending player from generating more meter. However, because the opponent has ground C at their disposal, you usually want to commit to either doing a normal throw or like a meaty strike. In this situation, back A can be meaty, for example. That's just because ground C gives a worse knockdown, and it still loses to the same situation that throw loses to. It is technically possible for the attacking rook, and I think we'll see an example at some point during this set, for the attacking rook to delay their ground C so they start after the defender. You can do that. It's just sort of a mistake, I think, because if you know for sure they're going to ground C and you want to really commit to this idea, you could just jump at them and punish them in that way. Walk forward a little bit, jump, get a punish for 3 and a knockdown or something like that. There are better things for you to do with your read than to go for the delay ground C. So in this case, the attacker going for ground C, it's not the end of the world bad, but I think in general it's just worse than going for the other sorts of options, as long as the opponent's sort of sticking to using ground C as an effective defensive tool. And it's maybe a little better when the opponent knows you're threatening a meaty strike, but even then, I think that accepting that you're mostly playing a 50-50 is a fine way to limit your exposure risk. So real quick, getting back to it. In this spot here, there's a sort of jump after blocking in A. So specifically, it's in a ground C knockdown. Rook has that micro walk neutral A. It's good as a strike because it'll beat things like ground C if it's done meaty, which Rook doesn't have in other. You can use forward A, but forward A doesn't give any knockdown. Neutral A does. But in this situation, because the distance you're already at because of ground C, the defending Rook gets pushed way out of your range. There's no like follow-up throw option available. And I think it's safe to like take this idea that jumping after blocking neutral A is a pretty safe option for the defender after they block this kind of ground C neutral A idea. If the attacker strongly commits to some sort of option, then the defender gets to see it and punish it from above. But it's not very committal. If you want to be super safe, you can even jump backward, like be ready to earthquake if they do something on the ground. So here we're going to see an example in a second of back A trying to use as an anti-air. We've seen it a couple times, I guess, already and sort of skimmed over it. But it's not exceptional. It's probably Rook's best ground normal. Oh, hey, Super. How's it going? We've got, but like Rook's normals on the ground are pretty bad at anti-air. Oh yeah, I guess I should mention. We're going over those Rook mirror matches, as you know. So, hope you're in for the long haul. Got lots of notes to go over. With the, but back A can sort of cover the air. Okay, it's a little better maybe given how big Rook is, but definitely downside is how all of Rook's air moves sort of adjust his momentum in a way that means that back A, while it can work, it tends to not be exceptional. And yeah, Super, I imagine anybody that runs Dune Silver is going to be in for a pretty bad time. So, in this case, seeing the opponent jumping, defending player decides to back A. This is maybe the trajectory and timing's okay if the other player was doing an empty jump, but you can see here, Vines sort of bounces the attacking Rook in the air a couple times and just lets the attacker go straight over it, get a nice knockdown. And forward jump A works a similar way where we'll see an example at some point. When it's done a little lower in the air, it also stalls the momentum and lets combo do a knockdown for 2 or just 3 damage if they want to cash out. Oh, hey, Damian. Yeah. Working over the some replays from your tournament. It's good stuff. Gonna go over all the 3 Rook matches versus Org today. So I think in the long term, Vines early like this in the air isn't a great sort of long range approach. It does have good uses. So it punishes the opponent for predicting with like a really early command grab. And Vines like this also really effectively covers the opponent jumping because they're scared or because they want to fight air to air or something like that. And as we see here, even the momentum shift can let Rook dodge around some grounded anti-air stuff. But I guess if you use it with any kind of frequency, you really have to watch out because it's pretty slow to reach. And when it's done this high, is mega punishable on block. Rook gets his normal throw, all that good stuff started. So a late Vines, on the other hand, covers ground C in an unreactable way, gets to be safe on block, but late Vines does not cover jumps and it can lose things like this back A. So that's the sort of trade-off to think about early Vines versus late Vines. In this case, early Vines works out well. So I want to talk a little more about the post-clap mix here. We talked about a little bit before that for me, I think I usually favor doing a normal throw or a jump, one or the other, especially if you have meter, jump strong. but sticking to one or the other is handy because the ground C cancel, which we're going to see here, it's got upside. It punishes the opponent for youming or blocking if they're scared of a strike for various reasons. But as a defender, if the defender is sticking mostly to ground C and jump, then both of those options just beat the ground C outright. So works pretty well in this case. But as a defender, I guess that's the thing to take away here. As the defender, if you want to get the most value you can on average, it's probably best to pick between those options since they cover basically everything the opponent can do. They can do a strike too if they want, but if they do like a neutral A or a forward A or something like that, then you'll take one and you'll grab them for two. So all in all, a pretty winning exchange for the ground seeing defender. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, it is a quality of this cancel ground C that it doesn't have grab armor. There, Damian's pointed out that it just never went back and fixed by the team. It is weird and kind of unfortunate, but in the end, it doesn't impact too much just because how early it usually happens. If the other person's going to GC, they would win anyway, since the attacking canceling Rook starts their command grab so much earlier. So at the end here, we get good success. Defender should have picked something different, but everything here, this is just good. Oki makes a couple of strikes, they weren't blocked, and closes it out, catching the defending Rook jumping. So one thing I want to highlight here, though, that's, I think, pretty significant to think about for anybody who's, I guess, wanting to really eke all the advantage they can out of Rook mirrors. Whenever you're fighting a Rook at 1 HP that doesn't have meter, there's very, very, very little the opponent Rook can do to stop you from walking over them. So in this case, the attacking Rook has HP, the defending Rook doesn't. Defending Rook also doesn't have meter, so every ground normal, like neutral A or whatever, it's plus on block. In this case, it's even better than +3. It lets the attacker do a forward jump A that the defender also can't get out of, which lets you do another neutral A, which sets up chip. The attacker can keep sort of looping these poke to get chip followed up by a forward jump over and over and over again. And as long as the opponent doesn't have meter, they don't have a good way to contest it. You can use Thunderclap in a similar sort of way. The only limit is how far back you get pushed. So if we go back, I think it's like 10 seconds when I hit this. When this neutral A knocks down. So at this point, the defending Rook can just get chipped out by the other Rook, repeating options over and over until defending Rook dies. In that case, that Thunderclap would have been chip out even if it hit on block, right? So the one downside of this whole approach is that whole sequence of doing different chip things does let the defender build a non-trivial amount of meter. So good to keep it in mind. Yeah. Okay. So end of round. We'll move on to the next one.
Round 4.
So this opening exchange is pretty risky for the non-metered Rook here. The metered Rook has jump super at their disposal, right? It's like a difficult question of being able to react to the other person jumping in the air at the right time. This isn't like the easiest to see situation, but if the meter player gets the opportunity, they should just be able to react to the startup, hopefully, and knock the opponent out of the air without any sort of recourse. The non-metered player has to do something like basically what happened here, which was committing to an early forward jump A, and this was just sort of a lucky situation for a scramble in the air, more or less. Whoever happened to finish theirs first was the one that won. There's no real like long-term advantage from a hit like that. Just reset back to neutral. So at 57 here, we're going to see the predictive vines get blocked. This spacing was pretty safe. It's not the ideal late vines that does 3 hits on block, but in this situation, it's probably throw punishable on block like by right about here-ish, but it's pretty tight. And in this case, I end up getting a throw, but it's after the defender had already recovered, so it wasn't a guaranteed sort of thing, right? So in any situation where Rook sees that a vine's hit got blocked and it's that sketchy kind of spacing, you can look at getting like just a forward A for a pretty guaranteed punish. It moves you forward as the attack's starting up in those 7 frames, so it's a pretty advantageous thing. Yeah, so in this situation, it's hard to judge because Rook's throw range is so massive that that it's probably best to just forward A and get the guaranteed 2 damage and move on. Like, why did this connect? They're so far away, right? And if that was able to connect, maybe this would have. Hard to say. So we get into Oki mix-ups, block safe jump. So Rook can safe jump the other Rook. I don't think it comes up at any point during the set, but whenever you're safe jumping Rook, you always make sure to do the safe jump correctly and buffer a jump whenever the attack would hit or you expect it would hit, and you'll successfully avoid opponent's ground super. So this whole thing is safe, and then we get to the sort of core mix-up after a blocked forward jump A, which I think is similar to Thunderclap, where the main options for the attacker is to either throw or jump. Things like strikes or ground C, they all lose to the command grabs. Technically, there's like a frame where you beat ground C with a counter hit, but it's not really worth trying to like get it with any degree of accuracy. So as an attacker, you want to be thinking about, are they going to do a command grab? If they do, I want to jump. Are they going to try and fight me in the air with their own jump? If so, I want to throw them. And if I have like a really, really strong read that they're going to be really passive on the ground, maybe you do something else, but most of the attacking decision making is between those 2 different moves. So if both players, again, attacker wants to throw or jump, if the attacker throws and the opponent does their command grab stuff, the defender wins by a pretty big margin, right? They get knocked down, the whole situation's flipped. If the attacker jumps and they guessed wrong because the defender jumped, then it's not a guaranteed loss for the attacker. The results are really dictated by... oh yeah, Damian, please feel free to throw it in Discord if you want. We'll be here for a while, so plenty of time for folks to drop by. Sorry for interrupting the train of thought there, but if the defender and the attacker both jump, if both players are in the air, then the attacker is advantaged by some number of frames. They can be the first one to do forward jump A, something like that. But if the whole core of this air-to-air interaction is that doing an air action right away is risky, especially if the opponent stayed on the ground. If both players are in the air, then you either want to use super to stop them, hold super to beat their super, or use an air normal to punish them for waiting. It's a rock, paper, scissors kind of relationship. So we can think of it as do an air normal right away, do a super right away, beat them doing an air normal right away. or wait to do a super, and that beats their super. So, fun little rock, paper, scissors. This whole guessing game breaks down massively if like only one player has super, say the attacking player has super and the defending player doesn't. Then the defending player just loses if they jump, and the attacking player sees it in time. Sort of flip-flop. Similarly, if the defending player has meter and the attacking player doesn't, then if the defending player jumps, they at worst get out with like taking one because the attacker got to bonk him out of the air with a splash or something. But the defender having meter and the attacker doesn't mean that they should be able to escape if they manage to get in the air one way or the other. If the attacker like wants to stop this, that's where throw comes in. That's the whole delicate mix-up. There's, I think, almost certainly better ways to illustrate this by drawing it out on paper or something, but I guess we'll just see it in action here. So in this case, predicting a command grab, the attacker jumps, defender did use the ground super. So there was a slight delay here, a slight pause, to sort of try to make it look more convincing, I guess. And then empty jump over and throw worked out fine. I think maybe, ideally, if you can get a splash to connect during the armored frames, it's not really possible here with the timing, but if the attacker jumps right away instead of delaying, then it might be possible to hit the armor and then get a throw afterward. Oh no. Sorry about the lag, Damian. I'll have to get to be a cool Twitch affiliate before I get different qualities of streaming. It'll all be up on YouTube later, hopefully with reasonable quality. So we'll cross our fingers and hope that the recording takes pretty well. So the Oki mix after this is we want to do more throws as much as possible to deny more meter gain. And the other really sneaky thing is after a normal throw lands, we'll go back just another 10 seconds or something. So we get our 2. So in this situation, we're doing another Oki mix-up, right? The opponent's on 3 life. The defender doesn't have a lot to work with. If the defender guesses wrong, doesn't block a strike, sorry, once again. If the opponent doesn't block, then they can just die from a forward jump A to forward A kind of situation. If the opponent does block, which is the safer thing, then you get to throw them. They're just stuck in a scary situation. So I think there's something interesting to note on the interaction after 42 here. Got a couple blocked forward jump A's. Oh, actually, I think I did want to mention that this is blocked. There's a frame trap neutral A here. Or intended to be anyway. Frame traps are fine against an opponent with 1 HP because they can't just armor through and punish you. On defense, whiffing a throw here actually isn't a lot of times using throws while in defense is a pretty sketchy thing, especially if you're at frame disadvantage. But when Rook's +3 like that, if Rook goes for another strike to catch the opponent jumping out or something, there's several things the attacker can do that just loses to throw. Hey Menno, hope you're doing well. I hope the quality comes across okay too. I know Damian's been getting some lag. Yeah, so throw's okay here. It punishes the attacker going for more frame traps. Ah, well, good to hear from you, huh? The downside of doing a throw here when the opponent jumps is it really does prevent you from doing anything else. you end up at too much of a frame disadvantage to do anything. Not that Rook gets to do much whenever the opponent's doing jump forward A's, but in this spot, as an attacker, I delay my forward jump A maybe to look a little more ambiguous with other stuff to try and threaten the opponent, make them think I'm going through an empty jump or something. In this case, I guess doing it early as possible forward jump A prevents the opponent from jumping out. It's just very fortuitous, I guess, for the attacker that we did it's like a synchronized swimming event with rooks falling through the air. I'm really surprised that I got a cross-up block there. That doesn't quite seem right. But it was lucky, can't complain. And then the ground C here beats the frame trap, catches the other rook. So we've mentioned this kind of haphazardly across the set so far, but frame traps, extra strikes, aren't so good against Rook just because when a Rook has lots of HP, they can burn it on those kinds of guesses, and the strikes just lose. Alright, round 5. So we're going to start with ground super versus ground C, which is a pretty silly interaction. I think might be worth going back and pausing what's happening here. This is similar to what we saw maybe a couple rounds ago. There was like a round start jump super versus back A. Same kind of idea, a predictive jump forward, trying to use super as a button to just guard Rook against everything. In fact, this might have been intended to be a jump super that was just pressed a little later. But jump super, ground super, they're both buttons that work really well against the opponent doing anything, or even just being too passive in the case of this ground super. So it worked okay. Again, as an attacker at this point, because it worked, number one priority is to keep throw loops going as long as possible to deny the opponent meter gain. The worst thing that can happen is, as an attacker, giving up Oki pressure, and then if you lose Oki pressure as the attacker, then you're going to end up in a situation where the opponent has meter and you don't, which is very, very, very restrictive. We'll hopefully see at least one example later in the set. Oh yeah, so Damian points out that the game sometimes weird to like it'll show a cross-up block, but it really hits same side. It's a little mysterious in that sort of way. So I definitely believe it. So wouldn't worry about it too much. We'll pretend that was like an expertly timed one frame cross-up block, because that seems incredibly likely. Okay, but seriously. So ground super worked out here. Now the pressure's on the attacker to not let things end, and right away just drop it. Getting the hit is fine. Missing the confirm to a forward A is not so fine. So I think forward A in this situation is normally quite okay. In a lot of matchups, Rook doesn't like using forward A after a hit. You want to get a knockdown, you want to keep the Oki going. But when you've got 8 life versus what would be 2, Rook just being up a bunch means that you can resort to safer sort of run away kind of tactics. As a passive defender, you get more opportunities for trades. Maybe you don't win all interactions outright, but you force the opponent to have to do the hard work of getting in and getting close through your moves. So this would have been fine. It's very unfortunate to not get the confirm in the way you want. But here, it's blocked. Oh, does double forward A work on Rook on wake up? So I think you're talking about like if you get a meaty second hit on your forward A, it's a universal sort of combo. The frame advantage from forward A is actually very high from the second hit. It's just you usually don't get to do anything with it because it pushes the opponent so far away, and the number of like remaining active frames and recovery frames on forward A are so long. But if you time the second hit of the forward A to hit meaty, then the opponent can still be in range, and then you combo for 3. So yeah, that works on Rook. I believe it works on everybody. The big downside of that option, though, is that it, with how late the forward A has to do to make that whole combo work, your opponent has a lot of time to see it and react to it. Hey, purple shirt. So if the opponent's somebody like Rook without meter, then you could do it and all they can do is block, and if they make a mistake or if they don't see it, you get 3 damage, which is pretty cool. But if the opponent does have super and they can react to it, then you're really setting yourself up for a world of hurt. So I think the answer is yeah, it does work, and it could have some application if the opponent doesn't have meter, but you're always sort of playing with fire. Got to watch out for kind of what they have the ability to react to. Yeah, it depends. It's worth measuring your opponent and asking them, hey, can you react to this forward A? Then you're giving them something more to think about. And maybe if they're trying to react to the forward A, they have trouble thinking about your back A. Or they're not going to be able to, like, they're paying attention to that, so they aren't as quick on their reaction to seeing that you jumped or not when they're trying to decide if they should do a command grab. So I can see there being upside, but you'll want to probably use something like that sparingly, especially as your opponents get stronger and stronger at seeing it. So we get a throw here, get a back A ground C, good mix. So this is a really interesting cross-up I wanted to mention, because I think traditionally when I think about this back A ground C knockdown, I don't think about Rook getting cross-ups off of it. And in this setup, it just works. It's actually super duper cool. So what Org did was walk forward and wait until just shortly before the wake up finished. And it doesn't hit meaty. It's actually a good ways off from that. But the way it hits cross up here, it's something that the defending Rook can't contest in the air, I guess, is something that's useful. Rook was locked in pre-block, so he couldn't move backward further during it. And what was it? Like, the other thing is Rook doesn't have any good anti-airs to stop it necessarily. Ground C might work in the situation. It's kind of sketchy, because if Rook does ground C, maybe the other Rook actually goes fully over him and doesn't slide back to same side. But I think this is something that would be worth me looking into a little bit more to mess around with, and maybe look at against other characters too. But anybody with like a grave neutral A or an arg back A or some sort of like fundamental anti-air, probably, or even just fast walk speed, probably gets out of this in a way that Rook can't escape. So being able to threaten that's pretty good though. Yeah, solid points, Damian, about differences between forward A and back A. I tend to not use the meaty second hit forward A myself for the reasons you're saying, but the Rook mirror is a if I had to pick a matchup where I would maybe favor it over others, the Rook mirror is one where losing Oki is not bad, and is sometimes often, like, weirdly enough, it's kind of desirable. Oki mix-ups represent risk for Rook, so having an option that ends the Oki mix-up, but you're going to be out at a like back to neutral again afterward instead of being getting command grabbed or something like that. It's not so bad. Okay, so let's see. All right, we're gonna see another lovely thing. This is the forward jump A loop. If you haven't seen it before in the Rook mirror, if a Rook at 1 HP blocks another Rook's forward jump A at any height, then they are stuck blocking forward jump A's until they get meter. I hope your guys' fireworks situation sorts out. I used to deal with that a ton back at my old apartment. My house around here has been quite a bit quieter, which is nice. But sorry, what I was saying was the defending Rook is stuck blocking these. If you try to jump out and like contest in the air, you're super minus, so they're gonna hit you first. You can't like walk out from under the splash. Rook's too slow. You can't anti-air because things like command grabs, you're gonna get hit and die. So Rook's one response is to save up super meter and then use ground super to catch the forward jump A. So in this situation, I took a gamble on jumping. Sometimes an attacker will not want to let the opponent get a full bar of meter, and so they'll mix up what they're doing. Maybe they'll delay one time, or they'll do an empty jump throw. If you neutral A, would it dodge the forward jump A? You know, that might be worth looking at with... So neutral A does lower Rook's hurt box a bit. You can use it to dodge like a Jaina arrow from jump B that's meant to hit Rook's head. My instinct is that it would not save us, most likely. It might delay when it hits, but I don't know. I would have to double check. That'd be good homework to take home, is check if neutral A gets out of it. It's been a long time since I've tested this, but I think last time I checked, the only thing I found that worked was a very accurately timed ground super, which we will see later in the set, so good news for anyone hoping to see it. Oh, I guess one thing I wanted to bring up before we move on from that is that... Oh. Where did I jump back to? I think I jumped back too far.
Round 5.
So this, yeah, this is at the end of round 5. Okay, sorry about that. I have to go here and then my arrows work. Okay. So one thing I want to mention is if you see what the defending Rook's doing here between each of these, he does this little wiggle every time that this forward jump A is happening. There's no... I don't think we've talked about it directly, but fuzzy guard stuff, right? After you block a move, you can Yomi for a few frames and then go back to blocking, and it helps cover you in case the opponent decides to do something like a throw after their forward jump A finishes. But yeah, these forward jump A's are definitely buffered. And when you're wanting to do the sort of forward jump A loop, you'd want to buffer it. If you put any kind of delay on it, you risk the opponent. If they have meter, they can jump and jump super to escape. But if you buffer your forward jump A's, they can't even do that. They get hit before they reach the minimum height. So the loop's pretty strong, for sure.
Round 6. Fight.
So, Clapstall is the flaws mentioned before. I think in this situation we saw it beat, was it Earthquake? So there's still upside to using Clap, but Clap really only sort of beats Earthquake in that situation, or an empty jump. Doesn't do so well against any of the other options we've talked about before. Question about fuzzy guarding the forward jump A. it's very positive. So you can't fuzzy in a way like off of a block to neutral layer or something like that. In the Rook guide, if y'all have seen that, there's a section that talks about different kinds of fuzzy guarding for different situations. The important thing is that it's really hard to make very precise frame traps, making a strike happen right after they recover from block stun. So because it's hard to do a perfect frame trap, as a defender, you can try to do the hard thing, which is Yomi for 1 or 2 frames and then go back to blocking. Because as an attacker, it's really easy to do a meaty throw after they block a strike. It's easy to time that correctly. It is a lot harder to time a strike so it happens right after they escape, because if you're a little too early, then it's just a block string. They don't get hit. So, as a defender, even in situations where the opponent's very frame advantaged, there can still be upside to doing a tiny amount of Yomi after block stun ends every time, just because it's not very likely that their frame trap will be tight enough to catch you. But it doesn't defend against things like ground C, for example, but that whole situation sort of assumes that the opponent's not going for it, so. Okay, opening exchange here. Org's going on the offensive, has meter too, so it's hard to fight in the air. Clap worked okay. We've talked about why it's questionable already. So we've seen neutral jump A in a couple times in this matchup so far already, but I'll make a mention here, I guess, about what it's useful for. So it can be handy. Which is, sorry, what I'm saying is neutral jump can be a handy tool because when you space it properly, it really checks the opponent's ability to advance both on the ground and in the air. So, it's usually very safe when spaced properly, and it doesn't need to necessarily get damage all the time, but the fact that it punishes the opponent from being too active means that they're sort of committing to risk, and you're mostly safe. It does have some risk, and the risk here is that if Org sees I jump neutral in this situation, and Org keeps walking forward this whole time and does a ground C, they can catch me during my landing very reliably, or ground super or whatever. So in this situation, if we look at what happens, Org does a little wiggle at the edge of neutral jump A range that whiffs. We just sort of stay at neutral. But as long as the opponent isn't overly aggressive and they're not too close, then they can't punish you directly for it. So this was a fine example of one that was safe. Maybe was a little tiny bit risky. But if Org did a forward jump, like this is a forward jump, it's good. But if Org did one of these a little sooner, maybe wanting to fight me in the air or something, definitely would get bopped by that neutral jump A. So it's good against an opponent that's careful, or that's right at the edge of your range and they know it. But if an opponent's reckless, it can actually be quite dangerous. Quick note on the frame trap thing, just going to touch on it since Damian said a couple things about it, is that, yeah, I agree that frame-perfect frame traps are not very realistic. It's worth thinking about Midori and Rook as there are ground Cs that have 1 frame of startup. I don't think of them as being frame trappable. I assume that they beat it. There's sometimes upside that they do lose. Oh yeah, thanks for stopping by, Meadow. Hope you have a good time with the family. Summer vacation's a good time. Hope everybody has some fun. But aiming to have your frame traps be tight enough that they punish an attempt to throw you. So hitting within that 3 frames of startup that the opponent's trying to do a throw. That's a good and reasonable goal to hit. If you want your throws to be resilient against the opponent's fuzzy guard too, you should, I think, ideally delay them a little bit even, so that your throws also land in that 2 to 3 window. As long as you're consistent about your strikes and throws threatening the same range, then your opponent doesn't have upside to like doing a frame of Yomi or whatever. You just want the two to overlap as much as possible. Any window where they don't overlap, like say the very first frame after leaving blocks done, is something where you might be exposing a weakness. Okay, so neutral jump A. Just gonna kind of get back. I have to get a drink of water in a second, but it maintains space, it punishes passivity or like a bit of a mistake in aggression, but it really loses the opponent's all in on walking forward, or I don't know, even doing something crazy like landsliding you. Okay. So this was a fine example of Orc does a late forward jump A. It's not like the early ones from before. And the ground C here is just predictive. Cornerstone of the sort of neutral, the guessing game's out of neutral in the matchup, right? So there's risk doing the ground C. It could get beaten by late vines or something. But then after the ground C here, both players decided to jump. So the attacker wanted to beat the opponent doing reversal throw stuff or reversal command grab stuff. The defender wanted to get out and figured that the attacker wasn't going to do a normal throw. Or a strike, I guess, in this case. So once we're both up here, we're in that mix-up. Our mix-up is an empty jump will beat the other player's super. Because they'll super first and the second player wins. They'll do their own super. An attack will beat an empty jump. You'll be waiting to react and you'll just get bopped. And a super will beat an attack that's done predictably. But the winner will lose their meter and the defender will keep it. So, in this particular case, Org jumps and does super on the first possible frame, and because the attacker held it, the attacker wins. So, hopefully it's like a useful example of that kind of interaction in play. So, the attacker could wait, like as an attacker, you're doing an empty jump and you're waiting because if you get low to the ground, you can do something safe or you can do something unsafe to try and mix them up more. And if they try to use a jump super to escape, you get to put them back in the mix. As a defender, jump super protects you from like immediate aggression. Big downside is that, you know, this happens. If the defender, like if Org did a forward jump A right away, it's hard to say if, as an attacker, I would have gotten the jump super. Odds are probably not. So that'd be the sort of thing you might want to try and commit to if you're really, really wanting to get out. As it is, forcing the opponent to lose meter does mean these subsequent mixes aren't as scary. So maybe you have more chances to get out now. So let's see what's up next. Oh yeah, after a non-cinematic jump super hit, by the way, Rook does get a safe jump, like a proper meaty one, which he doesn't normally get off of like a cinematic hit. So with that kind of setup, we get a counter hit here. And mess up the follow-up. So, in general, forward jump A that hits same side like this, it requires a micro walk to combo to neutral A, if the combo is possible at all. So, some characters are thin enough that you can like never combo to neutral A even. So, in the Rook mirror though specifically, if you hit same side, you can follow up with a toe poke, the neutral A. You just gotta walk forward first. So, and the attacker, we back up a little bit, did walk forward a few frames, just like 2 or 3. It's just an unfortunate thing that it whiffs here. And like, ideally as an attacker, you confirm that was a counter hit, you do back A, you get the full combo. But, as it works out, block, reset, and a spaced back A connects into throw. And then subsequent mix works out for the defender. So Oki mixes are hard to play or navigate when you're at 1 HP as a defender because your command throws become so much worse that they stop becoming much of a real defensive option. And as a result, things like normal throw end up feeling better. It's still not over. Like with most of the Rook stuff, it's always still kind of going. But this closed it out pretty cleanly. So now that we've gone over it exhaustively, I'm sure we're already getting a little tired of it. We'll just do a quick watch through of the match. See it playing out in real time. And as you're watching, you can kind of think about the interactions we were talking about before, the difference between early forward jump A's and late forward jump A's, how the Rooks approach the air-to-air interactions, the 50-50 guessing games after knockdowns. Very useful to kind of evaluate that situation.
Round 3. Fight.
As an aside too, I guess while we're watching this, it's fun to think about Rook jumping forward and covering his approach with that jump super. I think is a pretty interesting interaction. It's quite powerful, I think, in a lot of matchups. I started using it in the ones where it was sort of conventionally known to be useful, stuff like you can use it against Jaina or against Arg to deal with their anti-air. But as time has gone on, I've realized that it's a really busted move. Oh, Damien asked about thoughts on back A to ground B. So it has a lot of upside in the corner. I think I talked about it a little bit ago whenever it came up. That one didn't work because it was delayed very slightly, which is just unfortunate. I don't think it was intended. But in the corner, it's quite good. It gets 3 damage and proper knockdown. Outside of the corner, I don't think I favor it too heavily. I would rather just do a normal throw to get the same kind of upside. The downside of getting throw punished is pretty bad. Good Oki mixes though. A great cross up.
Round 6. Fight.
Yeah, so when you see a Rook get counter hit during the cross up, like during safe jump Oki and that sort of thing, like here, odds are it was something like a GC. A GC is a mistake mostly there, right, you think, but it does punish empty jump throw and empty jump GC. So normally Rook just does one or the other, right? They do a safe jump or they do throw. They don't usually do ground C. But if you have any inkling they might do either of the throws and you don't want to pick, you can do that. You only really get punished if your opponent's doing back A properly. And honestly, with how I was playing, it might be upside to get counter hit because your opponent will mess up the combo. So, yeah, I think in general it's better to not do it. I've gone back and forth on it a little bit, but yeah, it's not too high of upside. Okay, so we've got another 2 games to work our way through. Let's see. This one is just another 6-rounder, not too bad. We'll work through it in the same sort of way as before, so just a step at a time. Oh yeah, actually that's a good point. Water's always good. Anybody need a break? I could use some more water. So I'm going to down the rest of mine, grab a refill. You all do too. And we'll be right back momentarily. All right. Oh, water has been retrieved. Hope everybody's getting settled in again as well. Good thing to check in on. Did you ever think about how Rook needs to take better care of his teeth? He's like a rock man, but that's quite the cavity. Or mole? Hard to tell. Wonder what they call it for rock guys anyway. It's a beautiful diamond. Alright, that's enough nonsense. So, round start jump C, it carries some risk, I think is worth noting. We'll see more examples of it getting beaten a little later. But the payoff's pretty good. Get a knockdown that lets you threaten like your normal Oki mix, throw, meaty strike kind of deal. So it's handy, and it tests an opponent's reactions, puts more on their mental stack. I suppose it is Damian. Rock jokes for everyone.
Landslide, thunderclap.
Good counter. So now that it's hit, you get your mix up here. Defender is picking ground C, and that's specifically to answer throw or either throw or command throw. But it loses to meaty thunderclap, which is fine. So the one thing you want to watch out for as a defender is if you're close to the corner, and maybe this is, I don't think it's quite there, but getting counter hit is actually way worse if you're at corner sort of spacing, because the attacking Rook, if they confirm the counter hit, can do the back A to landslide and then get a neutral A follow up. Total combo of 4 damage and normal like safe jump Oki afterward, so it's very, very dangerous. The like 3 damage by doing back A to landslide normally, like it's there. Most people don't confirm it anyway, but it's a difficult thing. So anyway, normal sort of conversion off of it though. In the second one, both players jump. It's pretty safe for the attacker, right? The defending player jumping would lose to throw if the attacker decided to do it. Instead, we both jumped him and played the guessing game. Neither of us have meter, though, so I think in this case, the attacker jumping and doing first frame for jump A, it just wins. Every time. No real downside. So the only problem would be is if the defender stayed grounded and attacker committed right away, then they're maybe opened up to like a ground C or something.
Fines.
Oh no. Damian's making more rock jokes. I suppose the jokes do rock. You said it perfectly. So after we're reset to neutral, there's this well-spaced vines again. It's not safe frame advantage wise, but the spacing ended up being good. And the defender recognizes that and just sort of indecisively wiggles, which, to the defender's dismay, results in a command grab. Very effective. Very good. So, lands the command grab. There's a little bit of retribution here. And here at 42 seconds, this is important to not do. This was intended to be a jump. We're at the height where Vines is very safe to be done this late, and in fact it would win against this ground seed. But it was done too late as the attacker ends up doing a landslide and gets grabbed instead. So, mistake was made, and good follow-up. Very victorious. So, not too much more to say about that one. Effective, like, Oki mix-ups for the most part, and a mistake like that, definitely enough to close out a round. So, that air-to-air exchange worked out for the second player who jumped, the meterless one. If you've got meter and can, like, look for the reaction, maybe you grab it. But in this case, I think the really first big relevant thing, though, here at 58 seconds, we get one Earthquake. The punish, the, like, standard punish at any range, if you see the other Rook Earthquake as you do your own, it works fine. So, after you land an Earthquake, you can do ground B to close distance and then do a meaty Thunderclap. The frame timing just works out. It's pretty nice. However, in this spot, Rook does a meaty landslide. So if you're ever playing Rook, this works on all characters. You do Earthquake, you do Jump, and then immediately after landing from Jump, you do Landslide. And you'll land and you'll hit meaty and not be -4. As a result, if they try to throw you, you get Yomi countered. This is a fun bit of tech. It's a nice little knowledge check. I'm sure it'll get popular enough that it'll stop working eventually. But just feels kind of good to do, you know? It is not good against any character that has an invulnerable reversal. Rook's a good example. Rook's metered thing. Anybody has enough time to see this coming. So if they mash out the correct answer, this is a good example. They get away totally free. As a sort of additional thing, if you are going to gamble on doing it and you don't know if the opponent knows the trick or not, it's probably best to do it when you don't have meter, because then you're getting the full upside of that possible Yomi. So, questionable decision, correct reaction from Oregon defense. And then here at 53 seconds, this is blatantly incorrect. So, if you're going to try and jump out of the mix-up, it's probably best to bet on doing a first frame, like forward jump A, or if you're jumping backward, that backward jump A is all the same. Doing the splash as early as possible will hopefully save you in the air-to-air. And if they wanted to fight you air-to-air and they do an early forward jump A, you're not going to beat it with whatever you choose. So mashing out the jump super here isn't very high upside. So, in this case, make that questionable decision, get one, and then mashing on forward A here is also a pretty bad idea, I think. It was definitely punched in this case. It was just a sort of instinctual reaction. I guess I don't know for sure, but like pressing more ground Cs to catch the opponent doing something like poorly planned and aggressive is a pretty good idea, I think. It definitely worked here. If you reset to neutral like this, you're not even necessarily very advantaged. It's best to just go back to playing stably. You wouldn't want to just randomly do a forward A like this anyway. And attacker gets punished as a result. So, this is an important interaction, is that Thunderclap in ground C Oki always loses to another ground C. It doesn't have enough frame advantage to hit meaty, right? And all of the cancels out of ground, so you end up losing to the Windmill Crusher stuff. So if the opponent does block, it's a more advantageous mix-up than like a blocked neutral A. But yeah, like it's weird. In general, I think you're best off just using neutral A here. It's hard to break habit. It's like trying to teach yourself to not press C, cancel after back A too. The Rook matchup's just different. So leaning on the neutral A is a pretty good idea. At least prevents things like this, hopefully. So that was good. And that was a nice high upside Yomi. This is just a good call. So a lot of times you can just sort of like mash on ground C if you think the opponent's going to throw you, right? Because it covers different options. It actively discourages them from, like, if it beats a mistimed meaty, it discourages them from using ground C themselves. And I think, like, most importantly, I guess, is that it beats the normal throw, which is what you're looking for. But if you wait and just do a Yomi counter, in this case, Org gets a good, like, a third of their meter. Yeah. It's a good result. Yeah. Damian's bringing up an interesting point about, like, back A is a, you know, it's on that borderline of reactability for a lot of people. It definitely is tricky. The visual cue for it starting up is not the most obvious thing in the world, which definitely hurts it. But if you decide to specialize in, like, reacting to back A, I think there might be some value there to be had. But if as an attacker you're noticing they're very consistent at doing the things that answer back A whenever you use it, it's something you want to be sensitive to, at least the possibility that it could exist. In general, I find that most folks don't do it from like a practical perspective, not because they can't necessarily, but I do think it's one of the harder ones. Maybe similar to like reacting to just ARG neutral A. It's like theoretically possible at some ranges, but it's really hard.
Round 3. Fight!
Okay. So back A against anti-air's fine. It's great. That's the use case we want to use it for. Nothing super crazy to see there. Quick question from Damian. Is there ever a non-meaty back A that can cancel the landslide and beat GC? If a back A hits ground C's armor, then you're gonna get got. As a rather strange sentence, but yeah. As soon as ground C's armor has been hit with back A, none of your cancels get you airborne fast enough, and you can't just let it expire. So I checked because I was worried. I was thinking there might be some canceler idea you used to get out of it, but you're stuck. Oh, hey, Catboy. Thank you, thank you. Hope you all are doing well. I know you've been doing some Pokemon. Your Nuzlocke folks aren't dying all over the place, I hope. I've tried that a little bit. I'm not very good at it. My Pokemon don't tend to live very long. No death still? Man, you're doing great. You gotta watch out. You're probably doing fine. I don't remember the way things played out. Oh, geez. Lost 5 out of 6 in the first stream. But great since then. That's solid. I think rival battle where my rival had the Whalmer maybe with rollout or something like that. That destroyed me when I got to it. Absolutely murdered the team. I don't think I was able to recover whenever I was trying it. Glad to hear it's going well. Over here we're doing some deep Rook analysis. So checking out the mirror, talking about all the stuff, using matches from Damian did that 1v1 tournament a little while back. So just digging through those. Haha, yeah, it's been pretty rocky. But think of the avalanche of knowledge we've gained. I'm sure it piques somebody's interest. Yeah. You should know what you signed up for. Alright. So, oh, thanks. Rock solid. We talked earlier about how punishing Earthquake with your own Earthquake is a totally fine option. In this case, the jump was just predictive, but if you get in a position where you're in that sort of forward jump range, it's an excellent punish to be able to get. So, in this situation, after getting the forward jump A, took the forward A afterward just for +2 damage. So, you can always take neutral A to keep the Oki mix going, but when the defending Rook has meter and the attacker doesn't, it's dangerous. When you've got a life lead, you can use forward A to limit how much variance you're allowing into the match. You do a neutral A, you're embracing the fact that they might Yomi counter you or ground C you, or because they have meter, maybe they'll jump super you after some mix-up. Jeez. So, in this case, take the forward A, push the opponent out, sort of reset the situation, and be happy with your 4-point life lead. So, after that, with that in mind, the fact that I traded more Oki mix-ups to take a sort of safe approach, going a little more defensive, playing a little slower, taking these neutral jump spacings, and just trying to poke the opponent, it works fine. So, and immediately after it, Org does this early, that first frame forward jump A, which we've talked about, good air-to-air, and it can punish the opponent if they're like super duper passive or they don't get the reaction. But with a reactive ground C, you get a clean punish. And that there is a good example of the safe. Oh no, spoilers. If you're ever wanting to be really safe in a situation like this, doing vines at about this height when you're overlapping with the other Rook, you get 3 hits on block. You can even do it a little lower and be similarly safe, but it breaks armor, right? And the opponent ends up at a range where there's no micro walk throw possible. Now, I have a bad habit, very honestly. Sometimes I'll mash ground super in situations where I think they're going to mess up a punish, sort of like this, right? But in this situation, get ready for it. Aww. Wah, wah, wah. Ground super doesn't have very good range. You'll see it happen like when I'm playing against Arg, that Arg will like have a neutral A that clips through my head and my ground super misses. Yeah. I liked the synchronized swimming earlier too. I don't know if you were here for that purple shirt, but it was pretty good. So, habits like these are really dangerous when the opponent knows about them and can exploit them. Oh, in this situation, right, ground C would have reached it as better range, better reach. But, and like the downside here was pretty extreme. Lost meter, opponent still has full meter. And they've got like even a punish in this case. They take forward A, which works out fine. Could have gotten a throw and things would have been really, really bad. So that was the yeah, in summary, that was the wrong thing to press to punish the poke. Would have been better, less expensive to use ground C there. It's not like I couldn't tank a hit or whatever from them doing something. And I think most importantly, we're like exposing a pattern that can be exploited by our opponent, and Org's really good at doing that. Okay. So here we go. So we got a blocked Thunderclap. We know that the mix-up is mostly between throw and jump. This is a special situation where the attacker, the advantaged player, does not have super meter, but the defender does. The defender jumping here is really effective. We've talked about like the attacker jumps, they're mostly safe. Things are usually pretty peachy. When the defender has meter, it's really strong for them to jump. As an attacker, you want to keep this in mind and be ready to threaten throw more, I think. In this situation, both players jump, and this works out really well for the defender. Or gets out with the forward jump A, but even then they could have ground jump supered if they wanted to burn meter, and they're guaranteed to get out of it. So the jump was mostly okay on both sides, but as an attacker, taking this jump does mean you're going to lose to the opponent's jump super if they decide to use it. There's no real way out of it. So it's this. Good punish. Good knockdown. And here's a good, in this case, Org is still the only person with meter, and this has been going on for a while. This is why having meter advantage is so good. Both players decided to jump again. Because the defender decided to jump, there is no button they can press that will save them from the jump super. The one like sort of silver lining for the defender here is that the chip didn't persist. Jump super does count as a strike at the start. So not just outright dead, but this lets Org start the jumping loop. So we talked about this before. There's no way out except if you do a frame precise ground super right here. 4, 5, 6. That's all the star up you get of invincibility. Then you get to throw the opponent. So it's one of those things that we'll back up and just for good measure. It looks pretty sketchy because it's exactly when they're going to hit you, and it has to last the entire time they're in the air. But I think in reality it's like a 2-frame window, because you could do it like 1 frame before this. This last frame, they're not actually hitting you, right? So it seems really tight. In actuality, it's not that bad. The opponent's timing is very consistent if they're keeping the lock on you. So worth practicing for the Rook mirror.
Round 4. Fight. Falls. Landslide.
Okay. Things played out a little fast there, but so Earthquake good, Landslide, or sorry, that wasn't Earthquake, that was Vines, air to air. So with air to air Vines, depending on where you hit and who you're fighting and how far you are off the ground, the range isn't always going to allow you to threaten a knockdown like an Oki setup, like an Earthquake or whatever. The frame advantage just isn't as good. So in this case, Org gets to use Landslide, but by the time they recover and I recover, they're like, they only have 3 frames and they're not in reach to get the throw. In this case, Ground C ends up punishing just fine, which works out. But this is another great example. I mentioned it earlier. Meaty Landslide is that fun gimmicky trick. People might know how to play around it or whatever, But especially if you're not like a situation like this where everybody's at full health, but if you're in a desperate spot, you've got like 1 or 2 HP, and you have to steal advantage from your opponent. You have to be in high variance situations. Getting immediate landslide and being like -1 or whatever, that is an okay spot for Rook to be. Even when you're -1, the opponent has to think about, can they try and throw you? Should they jump away and try to be safe? The right answer isn't necessarily very clear. So it forces the opponent to make a risky decision, even if they're technically advantaged. So worth exercising, and Rook doesn't have a clean response to without meter. So a situation like this Vines does allow you to walk forward and do a media landslide if you can time it. It's just a sketchy thing to get right, so you should practice it if you want to be able to do it. Okay, let's see. So here's another good example of that questionable Thunderclap. Better to get a neutral A here to get a knockdown and stuff. It's just a habit that's hard to break. Back A is pretty good after GC in a lot of matchups, just not so much in this one. But the opponent jumping out is probably one of the best results you can ask for, so certainly not complaining. So that was an effective forward A poke. The downside's always high on it, right? But when it works, like resetting to neutral, getting 1 damage is a fine result. Another well-spaced Vines too. There's no good answer. Last time I waffled back and forth and got ground seed. Didn't happen this time, thankfully. But it's the same sort of idea.
Vines.
Another good Vines. Bad ground C. Okay. So we're in a mix-up situation here. Yeah, I agree. I'm not... In general, I think I'm not a fan of doing a Vines high in the air, but a lot of Org's Vines have been spaced really well so that they don't end up punishable even when they're minus like that. So here, Org's very plus. Let's throw... I think these are just normal mix-ups. Yeah. Here, walking forward and jump to bait the ground super. So it's good to do that kind of delay if you're like, well, jump back just 1 second. Get normal throw. Good job. Then delay, jump, and punish. So whenever you're thinking about doing this kind of delay, I think it's good to be sensitive to the opponent's mental state. Like having an idea of how willing they are to burn reversals and that kind of thing. And as an attacker, this isn't the like craziest high risk move ever, since like if the opponent ends up, if they jump, you still are in the air and you have meter and they don't. So jumping again is a good move, and the opponent stays grounded. Like it's a pretty attacker favorite position either way. So yeah, Vines is interesting. I think Vines gives up initiative in a lot of spots, but in the Rook mirror, giving up slight advantage and returning to neutral isn't bad at all. Yeah, I know all about your accidental Yomi's purple shirt. It's a great power you've given yourself. So really good bait on that situation, and I think part of getting leverage there is just having an understanding of how willing your opponent is to use it. And if you're in that position, it can be worth saying, do I want to risk losing my super and going into final round without it, kind of thing. Hard to say. Certainly got the wrong answer on that one from my end. Interesting. We're gonna move here. So this is another good example of back A to landslide. This catches jump. But I think what's really important here, we'll see a little bit of it, is that I drop block for a couple frames and then put it back up because I see that landslide's happening. And I have plenty of time to block it and punish it. And like not all of that's like super duper conscious in the heat of a match, But Landslide is one of those things that it's slow enough to start, and I think it's weird. Dragon Buster, I still have a hard time like jumping out of it, right? Even though it's supposed to be reactable or whatever. But part of it, I think, comes down to, for me, like holding back is a lot easier than holding up for some reason. And instinctively holding back when I see motion for Landslide ends up working out pretty strongly in Rook's favor. No, the defending Rook's favor. So here in this case, yeah, it didn't work out like it could. It's not saying like there's never a situation to use it, but whenever you're like worried and thinking about the downsides, that's something to consider. So here we've got some cross-ups. When I hit same side, just do a cash out with forward A. This is nice for the attacker. We've talked about it before with the like taking a big health lead and leaving the opponent one is fine. Nobody's getting meter advantage here. It's hard for Rook to like force interaction to happen when they're at 1 HP. So that forward A I think is very questionable. It loses to like everything else Rook does in the air except for jump B. So it works out in this case. But like Earthquake stays above it and lands on it and knocks down. And forward jump A, I think, adjusts momentum and shifts Rook's hurtbox, so you just get punished for 2 or 3 and get stuck in all of that Oki mix. So I think knowing what your like weaknesses under pressure are is good, and one of mine is definitely when I really want to close out a round and I don't want to think about what I'm having to do, I often resort to this feeling of wanting to just get a forward A to work. So identifying those, fighting against them, learning how to control them is good. If you're playing against someone, trying to keep an eye out for how they behave when you're at 1 HP can sometimes give you that very valuable information about what to manipulate and play around.
Round 6.
Perhaps even we'll see the fruits of that kind of reading a little later. No spoilers.
Fight. Earthquake.
Good Earthquake. Okay, so Ground Super as an Oki option here is pretty reasonable. So it's a knockdown where like Org's also threatening meaty back A and normal throw here. So there's reason why like Rook would want to block anyway. It's a difficult situation. Additionally, if we go back just a little bit through the cinematic, this is really smooth. Org delays the ground super until I'm already up and doing stuff. So if I did ground super, Org would win. Oh, thanks. See you, purple shirt. Oh, we're going to talk about the optimal punish, Damian. But as a spoiler preview, no, it is not optimal. This is the start of the scramble. But anyway, I just wanted to say that this ground super was really, really good. So not only was it timed as like a guess to beat blocking and ground C and things, but it also beats reversal ground super, which is something that is pretty tempting when you know the opponent's going to be staying on the ground, or at least you're pretty sure they are. So excellent for Org. Unfortunately, Defender's jumping out and does Earthquake. So Earthquake is not optimal here. It's better to jump over, not do a neutral jump, and do a splash and then like knock down with neutral A, or if you hit early enough, if you hit during armor and then they're still in recovery afterward, you can even throw the opponent, which is pretty smooth. So like optimally you get 3 damage punish and a throw knockdown. But in this situation, the fingers did what they did. Get a jump C here. And then the situation afterwards is kind of fun. So Org and I are both recovering. We basically recover at about the same time, and we both decide to throw. So it's just a scramble. So in this situation, my throw went through. I'm just gonna keep going for a little bit. So this is interesting. Jump super here. This is one of those like weird predictive jump supers to try and get in neutral. Deny the opponent some kind of anti-air or whatever. In this situation, Org gets a ground C after the super flash, which I think is something that they input afterward. Ground C is the right answer to beat it if it doesn't hit cinematic. It was just like a height and spacing sort of thing that made it work, I guess. So, sort of an interesting interaction to keep in mind. So, this jump super was close enough to be safe versus everything, but Org could just block and sort of reset to neutral, and I'm out meter, and they wouldn't be too sad about it. This one just ended up working out for me. And here, media back A is off for exactly a frame. Very unfortunate. As a result, Org gets good punish, and then I think what's really solid off of the rest of this is that Org gets good Oki mixes through the rest here, so it gets a nice normal throw, probably catches me jumping. And again, blocking for neutral A. This time a block, and then get another neutral A to close it out.
Rook wins.
So, a little note about the neutral A mix. Oh yeah, I saw that, Damien, talking to somebody the other day about like the value of jump in rainbow disc and how it's useful, like compared to head crush. Yeah, I thought about the same thing. Like I didn't think about Valerie's rainbow disc has invulnerability at the start, similar to Rook's head crush, and sort of like Rook's head crush to it. It deals a bunch of damage. Oh, it's funny that's playing the end of match song. But yeah, like, Val's traps somebody and stuff and gets her, like, 4 damage in Oki. And, like, Rooks will trade with things, Val's will trade with things. There's a lot of interesting kind of ways that they interact with each other. So, there are, like, differences in what they beat and how they're useful and that sort of thing. But they're definitely interesting ways to cover your approach, and it's really worth exploring all the things they do. Because this game doesn't have air blocking or anything like that, moves that give air invincibility are kind of busted, I think. Not like broken in a way that really, really breaks the game, but they enable you to do things that normally nobody's allowed to do. So, always worth exploring. So, in this situation... Oh, our HUD's gone too. So, neutral A is blocked. Neutral A to neutral A beats hard Yomi, and it also beats like a reversal ground C here. So it's like good against characters that don't have like a good reversal option. However, I think for the future, it's worth considering. I think forward A is similar but better, because it covers the thing that neutral A does, but it also catches jumps, because its hitbox is a little higher. So, neutral A beats ground C, Yomi. It's okay on block because the opponent's on like final chip. It's disadvantaged if the opponent jumps, but it doesn't lose outright. It does lose hard to throw. So, forward A still loses to throw, but it catches jumps. And your other options are kind of think about like throw beats jump and block, loses to Yomi and ground C. Ground C is like... It's like neutral A and forward A, but it beats block outright and loses to ground C and jump. I think in general you're probably best off leaning on forward A, throw, and jump, where you use forward A to beat most things. Throw will punish them throwing or like being really defensive. And then jumping like lets you start the looping pressure forever too if they don't have meter, so it's all good. Alright, we'll let the match actually play out so it can stop being upset at me.
Rook wins.
Okay. And then we'll go ahead and hop in on the third game and just work our way through that. Maybe at the end we'll go back and watch them back to back to back and and just celebrate the completion of our study, I guess.
Round 1. Fight. Thunderclap.
So, round starts with the spaced Thunderclap to start pressure. We haven't seen a lot of it in the set, on the whole. It can be a bit soft to predictive jumps is like one of its really big weaknesses, but getting a block out of it is really solid in the kind of ways you'd expect if it lands. So in this case, Org gets a block and gets a little throw out of it too. So, and this is kind of interesting because the range it hit, I think it actually hit meaty. 1, 2, 3, 4, like it definitely didn't hit first frame. So Org gets a little couple frames of walk forward, then a throw to go off. Oh yeah, so Thunderclap into throw is definitely a thing. Thunderclap can cancel to ground C or ground B are the things that like are immediately obvious about the move. And they kind of cover different things. But the real mix that you usually see when you're playing Rook is that you do Thunderclap and you're +1 if you don't do anything. Or you do some cancel and like start it way earlier. So you either cancel to ground C, throw, and get that nice knockdown. Or you wait and you throw as soon as you recover, and since you're +1, you'll like beat them trying to jump and you'll beat them trying to throw you, all that stuff. They can still Yomi you and things, but it's the sort of fundamental 50-50. You either do normal throw or that command throw cancel. Oh yeah, it's scary. It's very, very good. Thunderclap is the thing that Rook would like to get away with every time he tries to do a strike, that's for sure. Yeah, it's good. Okay, so Org gets the throw here. Here, I think it's worth mentioning, that's not a correct punish on the GC cancel. You should neutral jump here. That was just like an input error on my part. You can jump forward and do splash. Neutral jump A, like it's more startup, so it's easier to make it not hit, and pushback's weird and all that stuff. So this one doesn't work, and we'll just play through the rest of the round. Windmill Crusher gets the grab here, starts the sort of Oki sequence. But ground C is good against half of the things you can do on the ground. Throw works out fine. And then ends with a guess. The late splash is ambiguous with like an empty jump throw. So Org maybe either like blocked a different direction or was expecting the throw. Either way, gets the 3 damage. Okay, next round.
Round 2. Fight.
Yep, here's the ground C punish. I was out of range. Worked out. So this is kind of a fun interaction. The jump super's done either post flash or maybe it was input before it. But if it was done post flash, which I think it was, it is a mistake. It works out okay in this case. Head crush lands, beats the ground super. We're setting up some Oki situation here. But it's better to do something like a jump B to get a knockdown and preserve meter, or if you were just empty jumping the whole time, you can just jump again and like get a cross up splash into throw or something like that. So there's multiple ways to get several damage and knockdown that don't require you spending meter. So better to not do what was done there, although it worked fine enough. So in this situation, the empty jump to bait ground C, this jump here is questionable whether it's going to hit meaty or not. I think it might against another Rook, but your knockdown advantage after a jump super cinematic isn't actually that good. So you get to the other side, get a fine punish. There's another case where taking forward a cash out and get the life lead. Okay, here Org gets to steal advantage. This is the downside of like a neutral jump A. This is a well-timed forward jump A. It gets the block. Org starts pressure. When it hits knock cross-up like this, that pushback, Rook can't do much to stop the opponent from thunderclapping here, except for like ground C. But there's no like, you can't jump, you'll get hit by it. You can't do a normal throw to punish it very powerfully, and it pulls it back in. This sort of idea of using a forward jump A that hits not cross-up, and then using a thunderclap to extend pressure, it's really good. Works well against Rook, works well against most people. In this situation, gets a good knockdown. Blocked, resets, punishes. So this is a vines that whiffed. So Orgs had a lot of those like really close vines that worked out well. That one was at a range where it just was safer to take the forward A. This is a weird one. So Org does a fine ground super. I think it's good, right? There's like some risk, but in this situation I don't hit, so it looks like it's good. Oddly enough, when I recover here, it says jumpable. There's not really a reason I can think that it would be jumpable, besides, I guess, when Rook finishes recovering on the ground, he gets wider again, and that makes him get grabbed. But, yeah, it's hard to tell. The one lesson to really take away from this, I think, isn't something about Rook's weird body properties. It's that you might as well hold up forward just in case, you know. There's not really downside to doing it, and it would have had surprising upside in this situation. So, if you see the cinematic, no need to give up right away.
Round 3. Fight. Vines.
This is a good, questionable vines.
Vines.
So, neutral jump vines is always pretty odd. But, like, maybe it covers an opponent jumping near round start, which has happened a lot in this game. But on the whole, it seems like a middling upside, like high downside sort of play. And here, Org gets a good walk forward throw as a punish. Okay, does this. Ground C's overlap with one another. So in this situation, our attacker decides to jump, which, when the defender doesn't have meter, is a really safe option. There's not much for the other Rook to do. When the other Rook jumps here, as an attacker, you want to react to this. You see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. On frame 18, I get hit. So, as an attacker, if you're going to empty jump and you are holding meter, the like strength of this and the thing you always want to be trying to leverage is definitely, can I see them jumping? Can I get the jump super in time to beat them? So, attacker misses opportunity here. Good way to get out for Org. Attacker just takes life lead again. And in this situation, getting an earthquake to landslide sets up the meaty stuff. Defender is scared. Defender jumps. Defender uses jump super. And interestingly enough, this one actually hits cinematic, which isn't normal. What actually happened here, we can hear all these, is that Org actually delayed a few frames and then did their head crush. When you have that slight delay, you can even win clean with the cinematic, which is super smooth. Very impressive. So, worth keeping in mind. I don't know who wants to try to go for it consistently. It is quite risky. Oh yeah, they definitely delayed it. And I know, like, it's got to be intentional. It's not the kind of thing you can accidentally mash out too slow with that cinematic. So, it's the kind of thing where you have like 3 frames that you can wait total. and you want to do it in like 2 of those frames to get the cinematic. So, very clean.
Thunderclap.
The really sad thing here is it's just like the time I hit the jump super earlier this match, where the meaty is just a couple frames off.
Windmill crusher.
It's thrown.
Thunderclap.
And then does a back A here. Back A is a lot better when the opponent's on 1 life. They can't jump out of it. They can't GC it. And then this is really important. We're both at 1. The attacker's +1 after the thunderclap is blocked. So if we both jump and we both hit forward jump A, the attacker wins. So, and I think this is maybe an opportunity to just mention, I'm not sure if I talk about it somewhere else, but when the opponent's on 1 HP and doesn't have meter, you can sort of loop plus normals and jumping attacks, like forward jump A, and the defender doesn't have a chance to get out. It's just kind of gross. You keep building chip on them and they don't end up with a chance to escape. But yeah, I think that's correct. Damian mentions that like delayed jump super to win cinematic. It is totally consistent. It's just a matter of waiting till the cinematic's over and hitting it with appropriate delay. Similar to like with Rook, I think it is important to be able to delay your head crush to beat Rainbow Disc. So it's in a similar vein. I think taking the 1 and getting the better Oki is actually also okay. So it's certainly something you can work on taking, but the like non-delayed version is better than the delayed version in some ways too. In a situation where you want the guaranteed 2 though, it's kind of irreplaceable, so it's a good thing to have in your toolbox. Makes sense, makes sense. Okay. Going to round 4.
Round 4. Fight. Vines.
Look at them vines.
Vines.
Bad about not getting the punish. So here, I want to highlight this very specific knockdown because we actually get the ambiguous cross-up Oki happening here. So I think it's easiest to see if we go frame by frame. So the throw happens. As an attacker, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah. Org was doing a lot of vines across the set as a whole, and I think I did GC into them some decent amount. I don't think the interaction was like really wrong on either of ours parts, but it's something that maybe if I were to play it again, I would hope that I would like pick up on it faster and be a little more defensive about it and see if Org would like adapt to do things that weren't vines more. But it worked out pretty well. So after walking back for about 10 frames, you forward jump with Rook. And then with this kind of positioning, whether you cross up or not is dependent on your forward jump A timing. So when I press A is whether I'll cross up or not. If I press A here-ish, then Rook will cross up. See, it already looks like he's going to cross up. It's a weird position. When you hit splash, his momentum stalls a little bit and his midpoint shifts forward, so he'll fall on the other side of the Rook. But because I do not, his midpoint's like somewhere around the back of his hip, I think, or something weird like that. You see he slides down in front of the Rook, and now if you hit A, it hits not cross up. So if you walk back the appropriate amount, you set up this jump where an early A puts you on the right side and late A lets you slide off to the left. So this is how it applies to every character. I thought it'd be nice to do a quick visual aid, sneak it in here. We'll probably see it across in the other sets in the tournament too. But in this case, I think that it'd be better to combo to neutral A, like with a lot of stuff. It's nice to like keep going for Oki, especially in this matchup. If you have meter and the other person doesn't, you get a lot of advantage by putting them into these guessing games when they can't do things like jump out safely. However, to be honest, I was scared. The Rook mirror for me is very like mentally taxing and testing. You have to play these like 50-50-ish guessing games that are still uncomfortable for me a lot. And Org's a scary person to fight. They feel like when you're playing as them, you feel like they're very, very, very good at picking up on what you want to do and punishing you for it. So I was like, I don't want to play those guessing games. I'll just take my damage. That was sort of a fortunate interaction. If we jump back a little bit, this was one of the sort of... It wasn't much of a reaction. It was more the questionable back A whiffs. And then I'm mashing on ground C anyway for no real reason. And it ends up catching the Earthquake. Ground C in general as a way to punish Earthquake is pretty good. Yeah, Rook top tier privilege. That's that kind of cross-up stuff. That's what only the top tiers get. But, so ground C is actually a good answer against Earthquake if you're in range. I don't believe that this was that. This was more of a, I used back A against their jump in. If my back A doesn't work, I hope I can hit ground C in time. But even that's a questionable thing. If they did the splash, or if they did vines, splash would probably land too fast for ground C to work, and vines just beats ground C outright. So, fortunate that the ground C worked out in this case, I think. So, this is post ground C Oki versus a 1 HP no meter Rook. So, Thunderclap's great. Follows up with a forward A to try and punish a jump out. Also leaves the opponent at 1 HP. So, with this kind of situation, the opponent's in a very difficult spot. It's easy to go into sort of full poke mode. It works out this time. Org went for the forward jump to sort of punish something like a forward A. It just, the timing didn't work out. The predictions like this, I guess I've been saying that quite a bit, that like the guess didn't work out. When you're making predicted moves, it's like some percent of the time they work, some percent of the time they don't. The forward jump, I think, was a very reasonable guess for Org, and the forward A was a reasonable thing for me to do in this situation too. Whether they work or not depends on the little factors like when we both decided to press them and that kind of thing. So, in this situation, I'd say forward A beats jump like probably more than 60-70% of the time, but the situation where forward jump works is very, very good. So, that's how it works. When I have this problem, and I recommend watching out for it if you have it too, is that when the opponent's at a low HP position, it's happened a few more times across this whole set, that I will go into sort of like a poking mode. I like get blinders on and I don't want to commit to risky moves. Like I don't want to play normally. But that can be dangerous. You open yourself up to like, if this forward jump was timed a little differently, it's very, very dangerous. We'll see an example later. So, oh yeah, real quick comment from Damian about the never have full confidence in Rook mirrors just because there's so much mind games, mostly guessing. Yeah, no, Rook mirrors are, there's like, I think it's the good kind of guessing where you are making like hedged bets against what the other person wants to do. And a lot of them are, there's like a good mix of rock, paper, scissorsy sort of reaction, like guesses where it's blind. And then there's some that are made on like a continuous range, things like jumping against a forward A where you're trying to guess the timing to get past the fireball of Rook's leg. And then there's also things that are like reactionary, or you create situations to try and use reactions, like when you jump after a plus normal to try and get a reaction head crush. It's got that healthy mix. It's just Rook's normal thing is you play lots of neutral, and then the guessing games are really easy for Rook when he gets in. This is like the opposite, where you play some neutral, but mostly the guessing games are hard and volatile. So it just makes it scary. Okay.
Fight.
There's not a lot to talk about with this one. There's some round start neutral jumps. The first one hits counter hit. That's great. Neutral jump, swatting out stuff in the air. That's kind of what you want with the move. The second neutral jump here, seeing Org in the air, decided to not press anything and just land and block, which worked out really, really well in this particular case. It's unfortunate for Rook. Like, Vines
Vines.
doesn't have the best reach, and the way that it stalls momentum actually made Org just be too high for it to hit in this case, as Rook kept falling. So, whenever you're neutral jumping, sometimes doing nothing is fine. It's kind of based on what you're guessing.
Checkmate.
That's a good predictive ground super. It was against a late forward jump A. Good bait. And then got me scared of some kind of cross-up idea finishing out the round normally.
Round
So,
6.
solid stuff from Org. Just good Oki decisions closes out the round. In general, after Rook's neutral A, you can't cross up Rook. I got scared though. That ground, the back A to ground C cancel that crossed me up earlier got me a little scared that there was going to be something like that happening again, and it was enough to put that seed of doubt in my mind. So,
Fight.
it's good stuff. In this case, predictive ground C did not work out. There's this idea that if Org did anything here that stalled their momentum, like ground C, or sorry, jump C or jump A, I'm pretty sure this ground C catches just fine. They're holding forward and up, so they get a punish. Don't get the confirm, unfortunately. And I can't speak for like how things were going through on Organous's end, right? So I'm not gonna try and like attribute the confirm to anything or whatever, but this is a fine spot for me to mention like when I miss confirms, two things I'm thinking about. So it's not like missing a confirm is super crazy, and sometimes like confirms are hard to get in the first place. So it's not the end of the world to miss them. They happen in like every game of every tournament right now, right? So I think for me, what I try to reflect on whenever I miss one is if I can identify why I didn't get it. And most often it's because when I do a jump attack, but I start mentally committing to like a certain outcome. I think, okay, they're going to block, and I know they're going to block, so I'm going to use ground C to catch them afterward. If I get myself in that kind of mental state as my jump arc is closing out, then I'll just totally overlook that the move actually hit. I'm already like mentally locked into doing ground C afterward. So for me, it's like mostly a matter of not locking myself into something. I think, oh, they're going to block, and I really want to use back A so I can get them in that trap because I know they're going to be passive afterward, and it ends up getting blocked. It's just unfortunate. So I don't know if that's the case for Organous, but it seems like a fine point to mention it. As a quick aside, it turned out this jump forward A was actually just a punish on ground C as well. It wasn't even like a failure to block. So if you happen to be in a game in the future and you get that kind of jump, it's just a punish every time too. So you can even confirm it way out in advance. Again, not like something to... I know I definitely didn't recognize this in the moment of the tournament, that it was going to just be a guaranteed hit. I was holding back, hoping it would work too. So nothing crazy that it wasn't led to this thunderclap, but it's whatever. Yeah, hit confirming is like a definitely just a thing to always be conscious of, focus on. Okay. So from here, we're just going to keep on playing through. Ground C gets out of that follow-up, makes it beats the throw. Maybe catches a jump. That's kind of the idea. Gets another knockdown. Okay, we get a block. Good Yomi counter. It ends the mix. So as defender, I'm pretty scared here. I don't want to get got. So I jump and jump super, which is a pretty low leverage move, all things considered. So I thought it through afterward, looking over this. Question: would it have been better to GC there instead of blocking, even if you're thinking something else? You're talking about after the forward jump A, whenever I blocked the thunderclap? It definitely could be. It's one of those weird things, like what if they do a forward jump A and then they do another forward jump A. If I'm counting on them like missing their confirm, maybe it is better for me to always do something like ground C. But there's different ways they could miss their confirm, and doing ground C is a pretty committal way to guess. So yeah, like it depends on what you're expecting from your opponent. So I think in this situation it probably would have been higher upside to do a ground C. I also am not disappointed with not getting a ground C there. Just like the downside, if they did jump again because they, I don't know, were really committed to the idea of looping mix-ups. I do that sometimes. It's pretty bad. So definitely just something to weigh. Good option to keep in the toolkit for sure. But yeah, the jump super, like, it would lose if Org jumped. Org would also have super and punish me with it. And if Org jumped right away here, if we back up a little bit, if Org had jumped earlier and done a jump normal early, it beats me doing jump super because they just hit me before I'm at the minimum height. So Org could hit me out of it. If like the only situation that I would hit Org with his jump super is if Org jumped and did a late-ish forward jump A. Like, not right away, they did it delayed for some reason, then maybe I would win. But instead, I do this, and Org does a nice delay on this, and I think that's the right sort of thing. If the Head Crush hit right away, Ground Super loses. We saw it earlier with Head Crush beating GC, right? So by waiting a little bit, Org confirms that they're not getting cinematic or hit right away. And so doing a ground super is going to be safe. So it doesn't need much of a delay to dodge the whole cinematic thing, but creates a good situation. So here Org goes for jump Sioki, which is pretty fake, I think, in a lot of situations. If you think the opponent's going to cross you up, maybe there's some value or something like that. Didn't work here. In general, because it leaves you minus like this and it can be punishable, it's a pretty low leverage option, I think. If it's somehow like ambiguous left-right, that makes it more of a tempting option, but even that's hard to make it happen. And then defender misses punish, should have been a forward A to close out the round. Instead, we're reset to neutral. Everybody backs off. So I've talked before about my tendency, my habit that we've shown several matches of me poking with safe moves. Forward A, that sort of thing.
Earthquake, landslide.
Get this, that's fine. So what I'm trying to do here, and everything from this like earthquake landing is mega safe ideas. I use back A because back A can't lose. Yeah, maybe it was like a kind of planned unexpected thing. I like the earthquake that doesn't hit meaty, but the shockwave hits them. Like that's smooth. That's the kind of nonsense Oki I really love. But so after the thunderclap hits, I jump forward to take advantage of my +1 frame advantage, but splash whiffs because Org didn't splash and they're too far away. So we reset again at this kind of neutral spot. Org backs up again. Now I'm still in safety mode, and Org probably knows I'm in safety mode. All I do is poke with stuff. And in this situation, Org blocks, Org jumps over the forward A, gets the punish. Really, really clean. Good stuff. So this is the kind of thing of like consistent behavior like this. Org went for this kind of punish in a previous round too. And this time it got the right timing, the good prediction on when I wanted to forward A. Yeah, and that's actually why I think it's the Earthquake isn't the greatest Oki option, because I didn't see it coming, but I also blocked it. Because my default is to just hold back unless I have like a strong feeling of something else happening. So, like, it's not that the Earthquake can't work for me, but I think that, like, out of the different stuff I could do, I would rather not try to go for it. But, it's tricky. So, I trust that everybody who plays Rook will have different feelings on these things, I think, too, and that's part of the fun of it, is that I will lean off of Earthquake unless I make a mistake, which happens sometimes. Or unless I really want to, I think I'm being tricky with like something that's an ambiguous cross-up or something weird like that. But I evaluate the downsides as quite high, and I think that the odds that it gets like actual positive value is pretty low. So those are the things that shape my feelings on it. So anyway, excellent work by Org. Like this is sort of like the payoff that's been building for a few games now of jumping over the forward A and getting the punish to close the round. And now we're in final round situation.
Fight. Thunderclap. Thunderclap.
So there were some empty jumps there, and Organous punishes another empty jump with Thunderclap. I think that's going to matter a little bit later, to be honest. Earthquake causes a knockdown.
Landslide.
Set it up. Do the jump after the landslide, partially because of this. I'm still in the mode where I would rather not take risks if I don't have to. So taking that knockdown and doing this kind of jump sets up the late safe vines really effectively.
Vines.
So in this spot, get it. Get the Oki for the meaty clap. Get a knockdown. Okay. In this situation, after the knockdown and the block, we both jump. I'm doing an empty jump, but I don't get the jump super. That's how it goes. Get knocked back. In this case, I jump forward. Now, out of all the jumps I've done across this whole set so far, I've done effectively empty jump. Well, not set. This particular round, I've done like 3 or 4 empty jumps, right? So I think Org does this kind of like, it was too early, but is the sort of instinctive throw. I shouldn't try and attribute too much logic to seeing like why it happened. The throw doesn't work though in this situation, that's for sure. And jump super, the kind of like weird safe way to cover a jump in, ends up playing out okay. Vines works out fine. Cross up. Vines. Lap. So all in all, that was just a bunch of safe stuff all in a row, and it happened to work out. So there wasn't, I think, too much that was really crazy about those different decision points or things. And it's difficult to know exactly why some of them worked right. Like the jump B versus the vines makes sense. This one, whatever I was doing probably looked ambiguous enough over our connection or the situation to get a walk forward. Yeah. Tricky stuff. I don't know for sure. But when Rook's on 1 HP, the number of decisions they can make without meter is very limited, like we've talked about before. So, yeah, guesses one attacker's way in the last few interactions. The game never really reset to neutral. But that's the way things play out. On the whole, just to do some sort of kind of closing thoughts on the matchup based on what we've talked about, I think that, again, all of the mix-up evaluations are really weird compared to Rook's normal stuff. A lot of things, I think, effectively become 50-50s between doing a throw and doing a jump. Yeah, that's fair. Damian mentions that it doesn't matter exactly what their thinking was as long as, like, your decisions are... Like, they have some sort of thought behind what they're doing, and I guess in the end of the day, what you care about is what, like, the results of the interaction reflect. Yeah. So it's interesting to try and, like, I guess the thing that I was saying was not as useful. It's interesting to try and think about, like, hey, why did they give this kind of response here? Is there a way that I could leverage that more in the future? But you can't always know. So it's good to take the result of things at what they are, but can't always know exactly like why something happened or how to replicate it. So meter is very valuable. Ground super is a strong defensive tool. Jump super is pretty strong in lots of situations, especially when the opponent doesn't have meter. And ground C is really strong in a lot of situations, so playing around it effectively is what the ground mix-ups become all about, I think. And we saw a bunch of it across the set, so I'll, I guess, play out the rest of this. And to sort of celebrate us all sticking through to the end, I'm going to just run the 3 games in a row, back to back to back, without pausing. And that'll sort of close out our review of everything. So be thinking about the things we talked about over the course of the set, the different moves that are valuable or useful, the way that we think about mix-ups, paying attention to characters' meter and how that informs your decisions. I think above all, like, the Rook match is definitely a matchup of fear, of understanding what your opponent's afraid of and manipulating it as much as possible. So there's even more value to be gained here than what Organ I exploit, right?
Round 3. Fight. Thunderclap. Head crush. Windmill crusher. Thunderclap. Thunderclap. Round 4. Fight. Vines. Round 5. Fight. Checkmate. Buster. Vines. Thunderclap. Round 6. Fight. Thunderclap. Ha! Windmill crusher. Head crush. Ha! Windmill crusher. Thunderclap.
Yeah, and hold on to that thought, Damien. I'll have a sort of a slightly different take. I don't like super disagree with you, but something to think about.
Round 1. Fight. Earthquake. Landslide. Thunderclap. Thunderclap. Vines. Windmill crusher. Windmill crusher. Landslide. Windmill crusher. Round 2. Fight. Earthquake. Landslide. Checkmate. Buster. Head throw you! KO! Round 3. Fight! Thunderclap! Earthquake! Windmill crusher! Vines! Earthquake! Landslide! Thunderclap! Earthquake! Landslide! Thunderclap! Head crush! Checkmate! KO! Round 4. Fight! Vines! Landslide! Windmill crusher! Thunderclap! Vines! Vines! KO! Round 5. Fight! Vines! Thunderclap! Landslide! KO! Round 6. Fight! Earthquake! Landslide! Earthquake! Head crush! Thunderclap! Windmill crusher! KO!
Nice, nice.
Rook
And
wins.
one more. Hope everybody's enjoying their deep thoughts. We can share with the class when we're done.
Round 1. Fight! Thunderclap! Thunderclap! Windmill crusher! Windmill crusher! KO! Round 2. Fight! Earthquake! Landslide! Thunderclap! Head crush! Thunderclap! Windmill crusher! Vine! Checkmate! KO! Round 3. Fight! Vines! Windmill crusher! Vines! Thunderclap! Earthquake! Landslide! Head crush! Thunderclap! Windmill crusher! Thunderclap! KO! Round 4. Fight! Vines! Vines! 5. Fight. Earthcrusher. Vines. Checkmate. Buster. KO. Round 6. Fight. Thunderclap. Windmill Crusher. I'll throw you. Head crush. Checkmate. Buster. Earthquake. Earthquake. Landslide. Thunderclap. KO. Round 7. Fight. Thunderclap. Earthquake. Landslide. Vines. Thunderclap. Head crush. Vines. Thunderclap. KO. Rook.
Alright, and there we got it, I guess. Longest 12 minutes of your life. Maybe. Certainly was an exhaustive review of sorts. So, if we got any like lingering questions or things we want to discuss, go ahead and throw them out now. We can talk over things, I guess. But this here marks the end, more or less, of the replay review. I hope it was useful. Maybe learned about specific interactions. Hopefully some of the ideas of how the matchup as a whole plays out kind of got exposed in the process too. It's definitely a weird one to play. I would recommend learning the other Rook matchups first. It's just very different.